you file your objections. Your objections are usually just one or two lines, one or two sentences. And then you're supposed to put with it what your evidence is going to be, okay, witnesses and so forth, that's all. Then they'll schedule a hearing, which will usually be within, say, 2 weeks, depending on people's schedules and so forth. The hearing officer, who may or may not be an attorney, maybe Barney Horowitz, could be anybody, right, takes evidence and actually makes determinations, not just recommendations, but, well, they make recommendations, but those recommendations are, for all intents and purposes, that's it, okay? And then, of course, you can appeal those if you want to the board.
How long after the hearing would he make his determination?
Well, it depends on the number of objections and the length of the hearing, and also they'll put in their challenge ballots. You'll be hearing on that, too. It'll all be combined into one, all right? So I can't really tell you, Carl, it depends on the length, but from what I see sizing up here, it would be a fairly lengthy hearing. And I would expect that you wouldn't have any sort of a resolution of this stuff for a good 6 weeks after.
So we're talking about 2 months, roughly, after the election.
And so, I mean, I want to talk to you briefly, in fact, before I even, while I'm on the subject. There's also a different way that we can go about this, and I briefly spoke about this with Josh a couple of days ago, and that is, once you sign a stipulation, okay, the union is always free to pull the petition, withdraw it, right? And you can do that really up to the date of the election. You don't want to do it as close to the election's a date because the regional director can say no, all right? But you can certainly do it, 3, 4, 5 days ahead of time. And if you do that, there's, generally speaking, a 6-month prejudice period, meaning you can't refile for 6 months. The basic rule is once you have a vote, you can't have another vote for 12 months. But if you pull the petition, it's 6 months. If you file unfair labor practice charges based on some of the conduct that we've been talking about, and prima facie, meaning on their face, the evidence appears to suggest you have something, that 6-month period is waived. You can refile it at 3 months or 4 months. Now, this is my thinking on this thing. These cases are tough. You're dealing with a hostile agency. And I'll be frank with you, Barney Horowitz is not the most pro-union guy in the world. I mean, that's been my experience with him. It has not been extensive, but he isn't. Nice enough guy, but tends to see things in favor of the employers. My thought here is the real power here doesn't lie with a certification by the NLRB. All the certification does is say Julie has to sit down and bargain, right? And of course you can drag that out and do this and do that, and that's fine. That's all you can possibly get from the NLRB is a requirement that she recognize the union and bargain with it. Maybe our real power here is to pull the petition if in fact it looks like we don't have the votes, or if it looks like we have to win on every single challenge and every single objection in order to win. In other words, we got to run the table. We pull the petition, and we pull the petition with a press conference announcing that, not that we're pulling it because she's beat the shit out of people, although that can be maybe a little element of it, but we're pulling it because she has made it very clear that things are going to change at the coffee company and that she now will have an open door and is willing to listen to all of the complaints, grievances, concerns, and so forth. We want to be her partner going forward. And so we're going to pull this petition, and we're going to give her a chance to show that, in fact, what she has been saying in these captive audience meetings and so forth is true. By the same token, she better not take retribution against Josh, Kirsten, or anybody else who she believes, was in favor of the union, blah, 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 and then sit down with anybody who will sit down with us and put together, general bargaining demands, but they would be general. In other words, we would expect everybody gets a 50-cent raise, you know, within 6 months of being hired, everybody gets $1, whatever it may be, okay? If those demands aren't made, or met, or she does take retribution, or whatever, then you go into the community campaign. You work the Cornell angle, which I think has got to put the fear of God into her, from what I understand, in terms of, all right, you can put up picket lines. You can do, in other words, you can bring the community. This type of thing here, you know, can go into full year. The reason that I'm suggesting that you may want to consider this is that if you go to the election and let's say the vote ends up being, you know, according to her, there's 21 voters, according to us, there's 14 voters, so you're going to have a lot of challenge ballots. And the vote is either, you know, 10 to 12 in her favor or 10 to 12 in our favor, and then you got months of litigation and all that. The public campaign at that point is useless. She says, listen, it's in the labor board's hands. They'll determine it. If the workers rejected the union, blah, 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 blah. And if, in fact, that happens, you will have a very hard time going to Cornell or putting up picket lines or whatever if the NLRB certifies that the workers, quote, rejected the union. In other words, it politically will not fly. Even though we know that it was a rigged system, it won't fly. She would never expect you to pull the petition, and she would never expect that this is going to take on a community effort like, Peter, when you and I first met for the first time, you described to me, and I thought was brilliant. All right, it allows you, I think, to be the good guy. Julie, you made these promises. We're going to give you a shot. Okay. Now, if she comes back and says, I'm not dealing with the worker center, whatever. You're not dealing with the worker center. You're going to deal with groups of employees who are going to come up and say, this is what we would like. You know, we want a 50-cent raise or whatever. I mean, my thought here is maybe you push this into a different channel. She will have too much cover and she will be able to hide behind that vote, even as it's going through the swamp of post-election hearings and all that. Do you know what I'm saying? And it would also, by the way, if you do run a full-blown, I'm not going to say the word corporate campaign because that has all sorts of connotations, but if you run a full-blown community union effort on this, outside the scope of the NLRB, that Gimme Coffee and these others out there, they'll shit their pants because they'll know they're next. Okay? And I'm just throwing that out there that maybe this is an option that should be considered. And it also would take the pressure off a lot of people. I'm not speaking about Josh. I know you got, you know, balls the size of Saturn, all right?
Yeah,
but,
it's kind of like not enough women here, man.
You know.
Yeah, I really love the retribution. It's great.
Yeah, but somebody like even like Chris, the roaster there, okay? You know what, Chris? We pulled this petition. She's made promises, and you know what? Let's see. Let's give her 5, 6, 8 months and just see what happens. But I don't know. I mean, I think that would really change the whole dynamics of this to one of hoping and crossing our fingers and praying to one of, we hold the freaking cards here.